Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're really excited to see you here today. Today we have Debi Kleiman, who is going to be doing a session on pitching with impact. Debi is with the D3 initiative at HBS with the Foundry. She was also formerly the executive director at the Blank Center at Babson. So she's very familiar with student entrepreneurs and student pitches. She's also the author of First Pitch, an angel investor and a mentor to many startups. So she is an expert on this topic, and we're super excited to have Debi with us here today. So with that, I will turn it over to Debi. And just a reminder, everyone, this is going to be a highly engaging session. Debi's planning on having lots of you participate throughout. So please do take a moment and turn on your cameras. All right, thanks everyone. Thanks.
Thanks, Emily. Well, hi, everyone. Hope your summer has been going well. It's wonderful to see you. This is obviously one of my favorite topics to talk about, which is pitching. I've been working with startups for over 20 years here in the Boston area, as Emily mentioned, and have been teaching entrepreneurship at several schools around Boston, including BU and Babson. And now I'm at HBS. I'm at the D Cubed Institute, where I work with academic entrepreneurs. But I started my career in entrepreneurship actually as a marketer. And so that's relevant because what I'm going to talk about a lot in terms of how to engage your audience is based on a lot of things that I learned in my marketing career. So I'll get right back to that in a second. But Emily did mention that I wrote a book called First Pitch, Winning Money, Mentors, and More for Your Startup. And it is a book about pitching, but it's actually, and more importantly, it's a book about building relationships. So this conversation we're going to have is really about building relationships. I want to talk about how you can create the kinds of relationships you need to succeed with your startup. So the subtitle of my book, Winning Money, Mentors, and More, is about that. That it's not just about raising money. For some of you, raising venture capital is not the path you're going to take. Some of you may choose to bootstrap. Some of you may choose to get government grants or raise from friends and family. There are lots of different ways to raise money. So it's not just about raising venture capital. And it's not just about that moment when you're presenting that pitch. In fact, it's about so much more. I would argue that the pitch is only a very small part of what matters when it comes to being successful, talking about your startup to people. You're going to find yourself in many environments that are different than a pitch environment. You may be standing in line at Starbucks and happen to be wearing an HBS sweatshirt, and someone may say, you know, what are you doing at HBS? And you might want to talk about your startup, and that's a pitch moment right there. That's an opportunity to talk to someone about what you're doing. And there are lots of those. Those happen all the time, everywhere. And the entrepreneur that's going to win is the one that's ready with that very clear and concise and compelling pitch, ready to talk about what they're doing. So I love the idea that, you know, you're always in practice mode, you're always improving your pitch, and you're thinking about building relationships. Because the person that you meet in the line at Starbucks may be someone that is really maybe not able to help you right this minute, but maybe someone who helps you further down the road. So as you meet people along your journey as an entrepreneur, the ability to connect with them and for them to care about you and what you're building becomes extremely important. So let's get started. As I kind of referred to just a moment ago, that your pitch deck and your pitch itself is used in a lot of different ways, right? You can use it to attract funding, but you can also use it for recruiting and onboarding. Let's say you're trying to get people to join your team. Having a compelling pitch really can inspire them to want to come work for you for nothing or a very small amount of equity. You know, trying to get them fired up about your mission and what you're trying to do is really important. Same thing with, you know, as a marketing brief or as PR, if you read about startups a lot, you'll notice that the really good ones, when something good happens to them, they have this really great story to tell about their startup and what they're doing and how they're moving it forward. Also, it can be really useful in early sales. It's not a sales deck. Your investor deck and your sales deck should be different. But at the core of your pitch, your story about why your startup exists should be roughly the same idea as your investor pitch. And that same story is something that you can use to inspire people and get them really excited about what you're doing. So real quickly, I'm going to do a quick poll. And I'm going to ask you, how does pitching make you feel? One word. Excited, anxious, nervous. Yep, nervous, excited, uncomfortable. Empowered. Oh, I like that, Morty. All right, cool. Well, so a lot of this looks like a balance between excited and nervous and uncomfortable. And that's pretty typical, right? You're excited because this is like the beginning of your journey, right? You're getting ready to tell people about it. And if you weren't excited to tell people about it, I would be worried that you were not prepared or not as ready for the entrepreneurial journey as you should be, because it's really hard. But at the same time, I'd be worried if you weren't a little bit nervous too. Some of that adrenaline and some of that nervousness can serve you really well, but it's also human nature. It's pretty natural. And some of the people who are best at pitching started out being really nervous. So hopefully what I'm going to share with you today is a methodology and a way to think about pitching that takes some of that nervousness out and also harnesses some of that excitement so that you start to really feel comfortable sharing what you're doing with a lot of people. So this is Ravish Majithia. Ravish was a student of mine a long time ago. He's a material science PhD. He's an incredibly brilliant guy, and he's very, very technical. And so when he talks about what he's building, he's talking about very technical things, very specific, deep things. So he came to get his MBA, and he wanted to leverage his material science PhD to create an innovation that would allow plastics to be recycled more effectively. So the idea was that he created a magnetic ink that could be printed on plastic bottle labels, and those bottles could be more readily recycled in recycling facilities, because recycling facilities have these giant magnets, and that's how they separate the stuff that comes into the recycling center. And so his magnetic ink was truly an innovation that was going to help solve the plastics problem. But when Ravish talked about his startup, all you heard was this. It was just very confusing and like really wasn't engaging, and it made you feel like you were listening to something that was very dry and a little bit confusing. And what we learned and what we tried to help Ravish do was come up with a story about his startup that made people really interested in listening to him and made people really interested in trying to help him and be engaged with what he's doing. So after a while, we sort of dug in with him and learned why he wanted to start this company and why he was doing what he was doing. And his pitch really came a very long way, and his storytelling came a long way, and it turned into this. So when he started to tell his story, he was showing this image first. And this image is, a mountain of plastic. It's terrifying, right? Like, you look at that and you're terrified. This is the plastics problem in the world, and there are millions of sites like this where plastic is not being recycled, and beaches and lots of other places where plastic is being dumped and it's not being recycled well. And so even with just that imagery and his story to tell about his desire to solve the plastics problem, that storytelling really captured people and really got them involved in what he was trying to do. So my point here is that storytelling is super important. Stories sell, and creating a narrative about your startup is something that's really important to do with your pitch. I like you to think about your pitch as a story. It should be something that demonstrates why you're building this and who you're building it for, but also creates an emotional connection with your audience. So now I'm going to track back to what I said earlier. My early career was in marketing. And so I did a lot of advertising and creating digital marketing and television advertising for brands. And what I learned in advertising, and what you probably all have experienced in your life, is that when a commercial is really, really good, you remember it and it resonates with you in some way. It makes you feel something. It could be scared, it could be happy, it could make you laugh, it could remind you of something from your childhood. Whatever it is, if it's a good ad, it makes you feel something. And that's what stories do. Ads are storytelling, and pitching should be centralized on storytelling. So the reason why storytelling is important in the pitch is because it makes you memorable. Why do you want to be memorable? Well, you want to be memorable for a bunch of reasons, but most importantly, you want to be memorable because when you tell your story to someone and you're memorable, they're going to tell someone else about your story. And they're going to have this ripple effect along with you in getting the word out about your company because they're able to remember your story and they're able to care about your story. The other part about storytelling and connecting to emotions that's important is that our brains are wired to remember stories. Human nature, our very biological brains are wired to remember a story. And since the beginning of time, we've been telling stories, and people are listening to stories to know how to act and how to do and how to be and create values and create societies. So when you are telling something that's kind of dry and very data-based and not very emotionally engaging, the natural activity of your brain is to look for mistakes, to judge what somebody is saying, to look for the errors. That is not what you want someone to do at the beginning of your pitch, right? You don't want them sort of questioning, you want them engaged. So when you tell a story, our brains naturally switch into listening mode. They're trying to hear what you're talking about, they're trying to understand where you're going and going on the journey with you, and they're trying really hard to understand what's going to happen. They want to know, they become curious, they become involved. And it's much better to have an audience of people listening to you than of people judging you or looking for errors in what you're saying. So stories sell, and they're really important to tell a really good story, but telling good stories is hard. So I'm going to give you a couple tactics about how to tell good stories. First, it's about choosing words that connect with emotion. So certain words have more emotion than others. If you're talking about convenience, convenience is a fine word, but if you talk about freedom instead, which is another form of convenience, you have the freedom to get something done more easily. Freedom is a much more loaded word than convenience is, for example, but that's just one example. There are lots of words that have a lot more meaning. So do you all know what the Ring doorbell is? Everybody know what the Ring doorbell is here? Yeah, okay. So the inventor of the Ring doorbell is a guy named Jamie Siminoff. And Jamie Siminoff invented the Ring doorbell. And as you know, it's a doorbell that you can talk through even if you're not home, and you can see who's on your front porch, and you can catch people stealing your Amazon stuff off your doorstep. And it's this wonderful way to really keep track of what's going on at the front of your house. So Jamie Siminoff invented the Ring doorbell, and he went on Shark Tank, and he pitched the Ring doorbell to the sharks on Shark Tank. And as he's doing so, the sharks are just kind of like, no, dude, like nobody needs to reinvent the doorbell. Go work on something a little bit more meaningful. This is like not that interesting, and the doorbell's fine. And so he left Shark Tank, and he didn't get any of the sharks to invest. And he was really defeated. And he went home, and he really sat down, and he thought about, like, why am I building this company? Why is this important to me? What is this really about? And it wasn't about inventing a new doorbell. It was about neighborhood safety. He had young kids. He had his workshop in the back of his house. He wanted to be sure that what was going on in his house, things were safe, and his kids were safe. And so he started to really play with this idea of neighborhood safety in all the different ways he was communicating about his company, in his pitch, in his marketing. And if you think about it, those two words, neighborhood safety, those are very, very emotionally laden words, right? Neighborhood, you're thinking about your neighborhood, you're thinking about your neighbors, your street, your house. You definitely have feelings about those things. And safety, again, is also a word that has a lot of emotion to it. So, everybody wants to feel safe, and everybody feels something when they don't feel safe. So it's a really important word to a lot of people that conveys a lot of emotion. So putting those two words together, neighborhood safety is a very emotional thing. So he started to talk about his company as neighborhood safety, and it took off. People really cared about it. People wanted a Ring doorbell because they wanted to have neighborhood safety. Well, long story short, he sells his company to Amazon for over $1 billion several years ago. And apparently, Ring is a very big thing, and a lot of people have one. But the point here is that once he was able to figure out the emotional connection he needed to make to a product with the people who were buying it and the people who would invest in it, it became much more important and much more engaging and much more meaningful to people, and thereby contributed to his success. Now, the PS here is that now Jamie Siminoff goes on Shark Tank as a guest shark, and he invests in other entrepreneurs, which is kind of hilarious because, the other sharks are always like, "Oh, sorry, Jamie, we didn't give you any money. We were so stupid." But he is a guest shark on Shark Tank now and then, which is kind of great. The other idea that's related to creating an emotional connection with your audience is using metaphors or things that create an image in people's heads. So, when I showed you that image from Ravish's pitch of a mountain of plastic, there are a whole bunch of assumptions and unconscious things that went on in your head in terms of knowing what that was about and what that was and how that might make you feel. The same thing goes with using metaphors. So if I told you to go run 100 yards, you may or may not know what 100 yards is, but if I told you to go run the length of a football field, most of you would have an image immediately come into your head. Green grass, white numbers, goalposts, maybe a cheering crowd, whatever it is, you would immediately know what a football field looks like, and that's 100 yards. So here's a way to engage your audience by creating images in their heads that have more meaning than just a very generic or boring word. So that is another great way to bring emotion into your pitch. And then lastly, taking your listeners on a journey with you as you're telling your story. So this is, again, Ravish's pitch from his company, Magnimer. And it shows the hero's journey framework. So for those of you who have never seen this before, I think you probably experienced it because almost every book or every movie that ever was is based on the hero's journey. And this is Ravish's story put into the hero's journey framework. And the way it goes is there's a hook, there's something that's said that engages the audience right away. And it kind of creates this problem statement. That's the beginning. The middle part is where there's rising action. There's a crisis, there's a catastrophe. The hero is out questing for the golden chalice and running into the dragon and fighting for his life. And then there's the end. And in the end, it's the transformation. This is now what the world has become because the hero has succeeded, and there's resolution. And so that's sort of just that 3-section of a story, the beginning, the middle, and the end, or as you think about taking them through the rhythm of a story in terms of the hero's framework, it allows you to bring people along with you, and it starts to make sense. So what I want to do is pause for a second there and see if anybody has any questions so far. Okay. No questions. Great. So what I'd like to do next is show you some pitches. And as you watch these pitches, I'm just going to show you a very short part of them. So don't get hung up if there's information missing necessarily that you would like to see in a pitch. I want you to listen to the stories that they tell about their companies in their pitch and think about what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong, or what you like about their pitch or what you don't like about their pitch. And I want to have a conversation after you listen to these, and I'd love to hear your comments just based on what I've just told you about storytelling and about connecting emotionally with your audience. So this first one is a woman named Emily Levy. Emily has chronic Lyme disease. And so for Emily, she has to take antibiotics twice a day through a PICC line in her arm. And a PICC line is a piece of medical plastic that attaches to her IV and allows her to take her antibiotics treatment. And so Emily created her company. It's called Mighty Well, and her first product was a PICC line cover. So here's Emily's story, and I'd love to hear what you think of it after she tells it.
I'm Emily Levy, and this is my pitch. To all of you, I may look like your average college student, but since the 7th grade, I've been suffering from severe chronic Lyme disease and co-infections. My doctor decided to place a PICC line in my arm for long-term antibiotics treatment, and I had to do my treatment at my 8 a.m. finance class, and the cute hockey player next to me looked at me like I was a walking disease. I knew that there had to be a better way. Our first product is our PICC line cover that allows for patients to have ease of access and dignity while going through treatment. We believe that all patients deserve dignity and confidence while going through treatment because we're still people too. Visit our website, pickperfect.com, and share your story on our blog, Lyme into Lemonade.
Okay. What did you think of Emily's pitch? What did you like about it, and what did you not like about it? Or what did you see that was interesting? Thanks, Nathan. Go ahead.
I like that she brought in like her own personal story. Like she made it just very related to herself and what she was experiencing.
Yeah. Yep. She made it a very personal story, and she told it in a way that was, in a way that people could relate to. Is it Chiara?
Yes, I really like the fact that she drew a contrast between a negative emotional response that she got, and then her solution basically mitigates that.
Yes. So what do you think she's selling?
She's selling a way in which people see you.
Yeah. Right? So when I ask that question, a lot of times people are like, oh, well, she's selling a PICC line cover. No, she's not. She's selling empowerment. She's selling dignity. That's a very emotional thing. So then once she engages people with the idea of selling empowerment and dignity, then she can talk about a PICC line cover, right? So she's engaged you in her story that is pretty emotional. What else did you like about her story? Anybody? Diana?
I liked her ending. I think the ending is very important in a pitch. And she was like, because we are people too.
Yeah.
So she brought it to the kind of meta level and like the underlying, as you said, dignity and significance of this product.
Right, exactly. And she was really speaking to everyone. So it wasn't like it was just her problem or just people who have chronic disease problem. It's everybody's problem and everybody should care. Morty.
She helped us envision the scene, 8 a.m. finance class, sitting next to a cute hockey player and him looking at her in a certain way. Like I felt like I was in that moment with her as well.
That's great. Yes, exactly. You don't have to be a teenage girl to know what that feels like, that kind of awkward, like cringy moment where people are staring at you and for whatever reason. And so as she shares that very descriptive moment of sitting next to the cute hockey player, you can be there with her even if you're not a teenage girl who cares about cute hockey players, right? You can understand that emotion, and you start to feel something a little bit in the pit of your stomach, but you also start to feel for her, and you're starting to cheer for her. The other thing she does in that part of the story is she says a walking disease. So that's what I was talking about in terms of metaphors, right? She's obviously not a walking disease, but as she describes it as a walking disease versus just a sick person, you start to sort of see something more, because a walking disease is a metaphor for just a person who's sick walking around, but it's such a more powerful way to say that. What else? Anybody notice anything else about what she did, or like what she did, or didn't like what she did? Anyone notice what she did with her body? No? Ivan.
Sorry, I don't know if this is maybe what you're getting at, but at the end, I kind of saw her smile, and she was almost kind of like awkwardly uncomfortable at the end, and I don't know if it was just like she just needed to kind of finish her flow better or something. I don't know.
I think she comes across as really human, right? And that's important. I mean, really, in your pitch, it's okay to be human. You know, everybody that you're dealing with is also a human. It's okay to show your vulnerability, show who you are as a person. In fact, in your first pitch, they are really looking to understand who you are as a person. So if there are ways that you can expose that you have sort of the same kind of character or values or beliefs that somebody listening to you has, and that you're a human being, a lot of times that can also create a connection. But what she did also was she showed the product and she went like this. Did you notice that? What does that mean to you when someone goes like this? Grace?
Well, I think that she can show it loud and proud. Going back to what Morty said, if you are back to, oh, I'm cringing, like I'm shirking away, not proud of who I am or what I have to do, or if you're like doing that motion, it's like, oh, like this is me.
Yeah.
And I think that action really shows that.
Yeah, she wants to be seen now. And the other thing that sometimes people take from that is strength. You know, when someone goes like this, they're saying they're strong, right? And unconsciously, your brain probably thought that too. You just maybe didn't bring it to the surface. But when someone makes this motion, you think strong. She was showing you the product, but she was also showing you that she's strong, that she's proud, which is, again, reinforcing that emotional reaction she wants you to have to what she's creating and what she's building. So it's a really effective way to tell a story. She kind of pulls in all those different things that I talked about. This next piece of a story is Esther Wallace. Esther is a female basketball player. She's extremely tall. She plays basketball in Europe professionally, and she's starting a sportswear company for women and girls who are athletes. And her sportswear is very much of the baggy shorts and t-shirts variety. And what she's trying to say is there's a whole group of female athletes that aren't being catered to because sportswear or athletic wear for women is really for a certain kind of identity. And she knows, having been a professional basketball player, that there's a whole set of people who are being underserved in that market. So listen a little bit to Esther's story now and see what you see.
I didn't start playing basketball until I was 15. I couldn't imagine being an athlete before then simply because I wasn't exposed to women's sports. My story is just one example that representation is really important because girls cannot become what they cannot see. So I created Play Society to change that narrative, to elevate women's sports, and to use sportswear as a platform to define female athlete culture, so that seeing women who play sports becomes as common as seeing women who do yoga, and so that t-shirts and basketball shorts become as essential as sports bras and leggings. Thank you.
Okay, so obviously I only played a short bit of her story, but were you able to take away anything from her story that was interesting or that sort of connected to that storytelling idea? Diana?
I think now that you kind of pointed us to it, it's really cool to see the metaphors play out. And was very visual to be like that basketball shorts become as common as leggings.
Mm-hmm.
That's such an easy thing to do, and I think quite powerful to use metaphors.
Yes, exactly. Anyone else? Again, what's she selling? Is she selling t-shirts? Aditya.
Yeah, for me, I think the wordplay stood out of representation from that whole pitch. That's what I took out was, hey, this is something about representation, about community. And I think you mentioned that of using like powerful words before.
Yeah, you're right. She's talking about a community of people who are not being catered to, and it's a certain type of identity that is being underserved. And so So what's she selling? She's selling community. She's selling representation. She's selling female empowerment for women who feel like they've been ignored. She's not selling t-shirts. I mean, yeah, that's one of her products, but ultimately she's selling something so much bigger than that. So it's up to you to find what is that bigger thing that you're selling? What is that laddered up idea? What is that laddered up emotion that you're trying to get to? She also says, women cannot be what they cannot see. And honestly, I've played this clip 1,000 times and I still get chills when she says that. You don't have to be a woman to understand how important that quote is. And it's a very, very emotional thing to say. You know, she's talking about the next generation of women and girls coming up who don't feel like they are represented in the world. And it's a very emotional thing to say. Okay, let's do another one. This one's an HBS person. I don't know if some of you saw this. This comes from the night with Kevin O'Leary. I think it was this fall that he was here. This is a quick one, but I'll be curious to see what you see here that you like.
Hey. All right, Michael. Let's hear it.
Hey, my name's Michael. And I'm Jason. That's all I was going to say this pitch because it's 60 seconds. But we are the co-founders of Test Party. Test Party is the world's first automated AI-powered accessibility platform. What does that mean? Let me tell you a story. When I was in 7th grade, I got the Xbox Kinect. It's this device that you set up and you wave your hands and you can play any games with your body. We set it up, opened the box, and tried to play it, and it didn't recognize our darker skin tones. It was my first time using inaccessible technology that wasn't built for me. 17% of the world's population has a disability of some sort, physical, cognitive, mental, another type. And yet, we find that 97% of websites are not accessible. They're not compliant with federal regulation that mandates that websites be accessible. So what do? We built a solution that can scan the source code of any website and in one click, fix it. This is...
Okay. You see anything you liked in that pitch? Anything resonate with you or make it interesting for you to be drawn into this conversation? Kenny.
I really liked how beyond just a story, he guided your thoughts with questions, like how are you supposed to logically think through each step? And then after he asked a question, he would answer very succinctly.
Yeah. It's a really good tactic to use in your storytelling. Anything else? Tunir?
Yeah, I like the specificity of the story with the Xbox. Once again, I felt like you could kind of put yourself in that person's shoes and see how you would have felt, standing in that moment with all that excitement.
Yes. It's a pretty, you don't have to be a big-time gamer to understand what it's like to be excited about a new video game and then not be able to play it. And that awkward feeling of being like, wow, this isn't for me? I love video games. How could this not be for me? He does a great job with that wayfinding, too. He sort of takes you through the story in a really clear way. Anything else that you notice? No? Okay. I think it's a great pitch just because it's fast and it's quick and he just gets to the story, but he also uses data a little bit. So he does at the end sort of say something around the idea that 90-something% of websites aren't digitally accessible. So he does a good job of actually bringing in a statistic that is shocking. So while I'm not a huge fan of using a ton of data in your storytelling, he does do a good job of being very selective about taking a number and making it part of the shock value or the hook for what he's talking about. It's like, how could that be in this world that we live in today, that's still the case? Okay, so everything I've showed you so far has been pitches of someone sort of telling their origin story, and that's a great place to search for your story for your startup. It's going to be emotional just by the nature that it's personal to you, and so it's really, it can be a great place to search. But sometimes your reason for building a company may not be rooted in something that's solving a problem for you. Maybe it's solving somebody else's problem, and that's the case a lot of the time. So this next pitch I'm going to show you is a quick story about another person. So it's not about the founder, but it's about a problem that the founder really wants to solve for a group of people. But what he does is he talks about one person. So this is what I want you to think about, is that take your story down to the level of one person. Don't tell a generic story about a generic set of people. People can't feel anything about a generic set of people. You know, like, there are 300 million travelers out there and they feel like this. I'm not gonna warm up to and want to hug 300 million people, but I am gonna want to warm up and hug the person that he talks about. So this is just another way to show how you can storytell if it's not a personal story of yours.
Ina, and I'm passionate about growing African small businesses. Let me tell you about one of these businesses. This is Maria Kageri. She runs a small stationery shop in Kampala, Uganda, where we are based. And like most business owners around the world, her life isn't easy. Maria struggles because she doesn't have the collateral she needs to get credit to invest in her business. No one is building the tools to help her business succeed. And she has to struggle between often paying her son's school fees or keeping her business afloat. Maria, like hundreds of thousands of other entrepreneurs in Uganda, is a subsistence business owner. She gets the bare minimum out of her business to survive, and most months she doesn't even know if she's made any money. So at Numida, our mission is simple: help entrepreneurs like Maria turn their subsistence businesses into growth businesses. Now, with all the challenges that she faces, it's hard to know where to start, but we start in a pretty surprising way. The first thing we do is we help Maria get rid of her paper record books instead for the supercomputer in her pocket, her Android smartphone. So if you walk around the streets of downtown Kampala and into the shops, you will see countless paper records like this in small businesses. How can an entrepreneur like Maria know how to invest in her business when her data is locked away in paper books? This data is a gold mine for entrepreneurs only if it's digitized. So that's what we're doing at Numida. Myself and my co-founders, Ben and Catherine, have more than 15 years of experience working with small businesses across Africa. We've worked with organizations.
Okay. Thoughts about that pitch? Anyone? Hands up. Chris.
Yeah, I liked how he started very, very specific with this one business and then extrapolated from there. He added his stat about hundreds of thousands, but you really, identify with the stationery store and the subsistence living that she has there.
Right. You see her face, and he says she has to make the decision between her son's school fees and her small business, right? And you're looking at an individual who's making a very difficult choice. That is emotional. Again, you don't have to be a subsistence entrepreneur in Africa to know what hard decisions like that might feel like. Anyone else? Kirthana. I hope I pronounced that right.
Yeah, and I also go by Key if that's
Key?
helpful. Yeah.
Okay.
I really liked the photos from her logbook, and that established some credibility to the problem, and it also helped visualize the solution. Once I saw the logbook, his solution of just digitizing this seemed like the obvious solution, and so I was bought into the success of their solution.
Excellent. That's exactly right. So don't be afraid to bring in artifacts like that. So he brought in an actual artifact of her logbook and put a picture of it on the slide. Don't be afraid to do stuff like that. That is also a type of metaphor, right? You're able to see how her business looks. And it's really, again, exactly what you said. I mean, I don't mean to repeat you, but that's the key. You look at it and then you really get why digitizing is an important thing for these entrepreneurs. What else did he do? Anyone? Let's hear from some folks who haven't spoken yet, or else I'm going to start cold calling, and I know how you love that. Hey, Drew, how about you?
Yeah, I think I've agreed with everything that everybody said so far. The fact that they had, he demonstrated their experience across the market, I think was also useful. Just because, you wouldn't expect somebody to intimately know that target market.
Yeah.
Unless they were from there. So the fact that their team had 15 years of experience just showcases that they're not just outsiders identifying a market opportunity that they think that they can just extract from the population, but they're people who know what it's like to live in those areas.
Yeah. Having that type of deep vertical industry expertise, knowledge about the context of a particular country, super important. So he's building his own credibility while still keeping it within the context of the story. So that is also a really effective thing that he does. And it's a great segue into how the business works. So he does this very, very seamless move into what the business really is by emphasizing their credibility. Anybody notice anything else that he did? Sebastian?
He showed her paper log, so
Mhm.
you get a sense of like how basic like the system she had was versus like what it is that he's pitching.
Yeah. Did you see what he did sort of right before that? He lifted up his phone in his hand, right? He picked up his phone and he said, she's got an Android phone, which is what?
A supercomputer.
Exactly. He says she's got a supercomputer in her pocket. Okay, that's a metaphor. She doesn't actually have a supercomputer in her pocket, but for all of us, we know our phones they're supercomputers. They can do amazing things. And it's a really neat prop the way he does it. So don't be afraid of bringing props if they're relevant. He picks up the phone. She has a supercomputer in her pocket, and immediately you understand a whole bunch of things about how this could possibly work and how this could possibly be effective. So it's a really good story, I think. He pulls in a bunch of different ways to help you get connected to a story, even though many of you probably have never been to Uganda or been a small business person in Uganda. You can still kind of start to feel it and know it. Margarita.
Marquita.
Marquita, sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you. I like that he didn't introduce his team immediately. I think it's tempting to immediately like say who you are and say why you're qualified to be there pitching. I like that he told the story about someone else and brought people along before he then introduced his team, which I thought made it hit more.
Yeah, I agree. I think he does things in a really nice order to kind of roll out the story. He's kind of taking you with him, like we talked about, taking you on that journey. Okay, great. So we're going to go back to this slide deck here. And I hope that, seeing examples like that are helpful
Emily
to you.
Levy, and this is...
Whoops. Sorry, Emily. We're back at you again. So I'm going to quickly tag on a concept of unique value proposition. And I'm sure many of you learned about unique value propositions in your marketing class first year. And probably in other places in your business life, you've learned about the concept of a unique value proposition. But it is your magic. It's what makes you special. It's what's amazing about what you're building. And again, it is not a feature of a product. The truly great unique value propositions are related to an emotional connection. You're laddering up to something bigger, something that is more meaningful to everybody. And in that way, you're making your product stand out. So, an Apple phone, when Apple phones first came out, they had this beautiful user experience that people weren't used to in mobile phones. We were used to these flip phones that were ridiculous and hard to use. And so when the Apple iPhone came out and it had this beautiful, what they called magical experience using it, that was a moat for them, right? Because it doesn't make calls any differently than any other phone. You could still make calls the same way. You dial the number, you pick it up. But because it had this beautiful way of interacting with the technology, it became really special. And so unique value propositions, and I'm showing a couple here just to brands that you probably know, to make the point that it's not about a feature of the product. The good unique value propositions are connected to storytelling and they're connected to emotions. And if you have a good unique value proposition when you're talking in your pitch, the unique value proposition should be right at the center of it, of what you're talking about. And it should be, again, something that people can connect to emotionally. So, you know, you're looking at Nike, and Nike is, sure, it's about sneakers and it's about looking good in your athletic wear, but if you keep laddering up emotionally, it's about reaching your full human potential. It's about something much bigger than what you're wearing. Same thing with Netflix. You know, it's not just a streaming service, it's your escape from reality. And Apple, again, you know, revolutionary innovation, and you know, they talked a lot about magic at the beginning. And to people who for so long had been using flip phones, it truly did feel magical that you could, like, you know, see stuff the way you saw it on your Apple phone. So I'd want you to think about, as you think about describing your companies and what's special about them, to try and ladder that feeling up. So when I'm working with students on their stories and I'm working with them on their unique value proposition, I go through this experience where I'm like, tell me what's special about your company. And they say something. And I go, yeah, but why? And they tell me something else. And I'm like, yeah, but why? And I go through this like over and over and over again. And they get really mad at me and they get really frustrated because it's kind of annoying. But it forces them to dig into why. What's the why about your business? What's emotional about what you're doing that's going to make you stand out, that's going to help you win? Because ultimately, in your pitch, investors and everybody else that's listening to your pitch is looking to understand why you, why now. So they're looking to understand you as a founder, what's special about you, what do you bring to the table, what do you know is important, what do you know is a unique value proposition, and they're looking for why now. Why is now the time that you're going to win? So keep that in mind as you start to think about your stories. And as you start to potentially work on them, like, so if I had more time with you, what I would do is we would start to work on your story in breakout groups. But since I don't have the time to do that, you know, start working on your stories and start to see if you already have an open to your pitch, start to think about how you can make it more about an emotional reaction you want them to have. And if you want me to look at it, I certainly will. And sometimes that's the origin story. Sometimes that's like what insight drove you to want to solve this problem. But it also can be like, why do people want this problem resolved? Or why does it matter? So think about those questions as you start to develop your own story about your company with your unique value proposition right at the center. So this leads me to the 4-H framework. And the 4-H framework is something that I developed after listening to thousands of pitches. Like I said at the beginning, I've been doing this for a very long time, and I've been listening to pitches for a very long time. And I started to notice certain pitches were just more effective than others. And as I started to collect them and sort of started to be just a little bit more deliberate about watching for patterns, I noticed that the really good ones tended to follow this 4-H pattern. And the 4-H goes like this. First is your headline, and the headline is a 5 to 9 word phrase that kind of captures what you're doing, what industry you're in potentially, you know, what's your unique value proposition in a couple words, what's special about what you're building. And the reason why the headline's important is because it helps the listeners kind of get ready, get their headset on for what you're going to talk about. So you don't have this kind of cold start problem where you jump in and they don't know where you're going or what you're going to talk about. So the headline really helps you get people ready to take in your message, and it also starts to make them a little curious. The next part is your heart, and the heart is where you're storytelling. And the storytelling, again, is about making people feel something. The next section is your head section. And the head section is really all those analytical things that start to come up after people have heard your story and kind of gotten involved with what you're building. You know, you can't help but have a series of questions pop into your head as I'm listening to your story. Well, how does it work? What does it do? How do you make money? Who's the target? You know, if those types of things are now popping up, you've done your job as a storyteller because now they're intrigued and they want to know how it works. So that head section is typically the longest part of your pitch, but it is the place where you're sort of answering the main questions that now they have, now that they're intrigued with your business. And then the last section is your hope slide, and this is really just one slide. And it's your last slide. And what I noticed that most of the time, entrepreneurs will end their deck with thank you. And their their name and their email. Please, for the love of God, don't do that. It is such a waste after you've given this killer pitch and you've gotten everybody super stoked, and then you're just like, and thank you. Like, boring. Don't waste that time. With your hope slide, what you're going to do is you're going to paint a picture of what the world is going to be like once your innovation exists. And it's not what it is right now. It is what the world is like 5 to 10 years from now, when you are ultimately successful, building what you want to build, affecting the world how you want to affect the world. What has changed? What do you hope for the world because your innovation exists? So it's meant to be kind of aspirational and inspiring and much bigger than what you're working on now. And the reason you do it there at the end is because you're allowed to kind of extrapolate from where you are now at this point. You know, it doesn't have to be the reality of what you're up against right now. So it can be a little bit made up, a little bit of like, you know, looking in their crystal ball and seeing what's going to happen. And at the same time, it's an invitation to people who are listening to you. It's an invitation, inviting them along the journey with you and inviting them to be part of what you're building in any way that they possibly can. And it's a really effective way for people to then want to continue the conversation. So like I said earlier, the whole point of the first pitch is to get the second pitch or to get the conversation afterwards. And the hope slide is a really wonderful way to do that. So inspire me with your vision. So I'm going to show you how this plays out with a company that most of you probably know, the 4 H's, with Airbnb. So I went back and I looked at the deck for Airbnb back in 2008, 2009 when they first started. They were going from 0 to 1 at this point. And the idea of people sleeping on strangers' couches in a strange city was bananas. Like, nobody was doing that. Like, we're all so used to that now, right? Like, it's been around a really long time. We've all probably Airbnb'd somewhere, and it's like, you know, you're like, no big deal, it's awesome. But back when they started, that was a crazy, crazy talk. So they had to find a way to make it real to people, but at the same time, sort of show that bigger vision. So the headline on their first slide was, book rooms with locals rather than hotels. So this is the first thing I'm looking at when they're pitching me. And they're saying, okay, we're talking about travel, and specifically we're talking about accommodations, because they just said hotels. So now I've got my travel industry hat on. I understand that, and you know, you don't have to be in the travel industry to understand what staying in a hotel looks like. But then they say book rooms with locals, and I'm like, what? That is so intriguing. I want to know more. That's really different. I've never heard that before. So all in that just tiny little phrase, they've done a whole bunch of setup for me where I know what they're going to talk about. I know what industry they're in. I know what they are looking at, but I also know that they're onto something that's really different and maybe kind of weird. So I want to hear more. So their headline is super effective. Now, I don't know what they told as their heart story, but I'm pretty sure they did tell a heart story. But if it were me, I probably would have told a heart story about I saved forever to go to Barcelona, and I ended up staying in this really touristy section of town with a bunch of other Americans in a really expensive hotel, and I missed out on the true Barcelona. Because if you've ever been to Barcelona or European cities like it, the place where most of the tourists go is nothing like the real city. And I completely missed it because I didn't know a local there. I didn't know where to go, where the locals go, where the locals eat. And so I didn't get the full Barcelona experience, and yet I had saved for years to go there. So obviously I would draw it out and take you through my journey, but like something like that, where I'm sort of showing how the system is failing travelers today. Then in the head section, I would talk about, you know, it's a % of online bookings, it's a giant market, and talk about maybe, you know, that it's an online platform, that people can go online, and so it's very scalable. And, you know, start to answer some of those questions people have about, like, how do you get people to book in other people's houses? And then at the end, they say, travel is transformed, the world becomes a more connected place. Now, this is their hope. Now, think about that. They said this back in 2008. And they did it. Like, I mean, that's pretty cool. They did it, right? They transformed the travel industry. The world did become more connected because Airbnb exists, because people can stay with locals and meet locals and understand the local culture of where they're going. So they actually did it, which is kind of cool to be able to see that. But the fact is when you heard that at the end of their pitch, you're like, yeah, man, I want to do that. I want to transform travel. I want to make the world a more connected place. So at the time, they were just selling couch surfing, but they're talking about making the world a connected place. So you see how they laddered up there into something much more meaningful, something much more emotional. And in that way, they're inviting people to come along on the ride with them for something that's going to really impact the world. Now, a lot of times I get this question like, yeah, but what I'm doing either isn't that big, or it's not gonna, it's not this giant thing that's gonna change the world. Like a lot of the things videos I showed you were sort of these social impact maybe, or people say like, my industry's kind of boring. I don't know how to create an emotional connection about my industry. And the truth is that there are no boring industries and there are no boring businesses. There are just boring founders. Don't be a boring founder. You can learn how to tell your story in an emotional way. Everything has an emotion connected to it. Every problem that a founder can create a company about has an emotional reason to it, or else it wouldn't be a problem for somebody. So think hard about how you can draw out that and how you can figure out what that actually is. So before I go on, I'm going to pause there and see if anybody has questions about how the 4-H framework works. Go ahead, Kenny.
So I'm noticing a lot of these examples are B2C companies, not B2B companies. And the B2B examples we saw with like Test Party and the company right after that, they're obviously selling to businesses, but they're pitching to the consumer. So my question really is around if you are a B2B company or if you're a PLG company aiming to be B2B, should your pitch change depending on the audience? And what I mean by that is like the thing that came to my mind was the ads that ClickUp runs to like bash on Jira. But like even for me as an engineer, I don't really sympathize with sort of the messaging, but they're clearly going for the B2B pitch rather than like, hey, individual consumer, like this is what you should care about, because ultimately they don't care about the consumer, they care about the business that they're trying to sell to. So how should your pitch change in these instances?
I certainly think it's something to keep in mind. You should always know your audience, right? So you're not going to, tell a story about some poor slob in procurement whose problems you're trying to solve, right? Like it does need to have a certain degree of knowing your audience and the tone to strike for your audience. But even in an enterprise sale, you are solving a problem for someone. And you are solving something that potentially is going to have an ROI to that company. So think about that ROI less as in dollars, because you're going to talk about that later, right? Like you're going to talk about that in the head section. You're going to talk about how much money they're going to make because you're solving this problem for them. But think about, before you go there, think about all the people that you're going to be helping if you solve this problem. People work in companies, humans work in companies. They have problems, they have lives, they are human beings. So there's still an emotional, so I don't want you to confuse emotion with like drama or sadness. Emotion can be like, I want to get promoted. So it could be appealing to that buyer's desire to get promoted in telling your story, right? It could be even just something kind of funny, like, all the mishaps that happen in a given B2B environment or a given enterprise in any given day, mistakes that are made, or, disaster clients that you're going to solve for. They're all having real problems. So sometimes people, when I talk about connecting emotionally, they're starting to think of like, this must be something that makes me feel like necessarily like goosebumps. A lot of times that can be the case, but in an enterprise sell, it's maybe not that. But you're still solving a problem for someone and it makes them feel something. So try and figure out what that is. So like I just said, there are no boring industries. There are no industries that exist that don't have some type of emotion connected to the people that work in it. They have ambitions, desires, needs that you're solving for. So what is it? Are you empowering them to have more time because they're going to use your product? Are you giving them the opportunity to showcase their smarts because they're not, spending time logging details, massive amount of details for something? Those emotions are real no matter what the context is. So the point is the same, but you're right. Like, know your audience. Like, you're not gonna drag a story out that is like super like trying to make someone cry about a SaaS product. But there is still an emotion you can connect to that makes people care about your product. Because ultimately, that's what you're trying to do. You're just trying to get them to care. And it doesn't have to be in a social impact kind of way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, and we can talk about that afterwards if you want. Like, you can tell me a little bit more about what you're building, and we can kind of brainstorm around like what that kind of emotional scenario might be. Kier.
Basically.
Go ahead.
Yeah, key. Yeah.
Key, sorry.
Don't worry. I was just wondering if the order of the H's plays a role in how effective your pitch is. What I mean by that is, what if we start with the hope piece first to get people hooked in, and then go to the headline and the heart and the head. Does that make a difference at all, or is hope better off as the last thank you slide?
I think it's better off at the end in what I've seen, because they're not ready to appreciate your hope yet. If you go there first, there's a certain amount of buildup that needs to happen so that when you do get to the hope side, it's sort of a credible thing that you're expressing that hope. So I think it does need to come at the end. I will say though that a lot of people have some very hard and fast rules about the order of things in pitches. And I do think the 4 H's in the order that I put them is right. But I will put an asterisk on this, and I will say, if you either have really good traction already, I would talk about that right away. So you can put that up and then move on. Or if you have something about your team that is extraordinary, so somebody either has a patent or a very unique access to data or very unique access to people, those are things that could eventually be moats for you. I would pull those up to the front. Often when you're at the earliest stages of building, you don't have that stuff. So later stage pitches tend to have that stuff up front, but most early stage pitches don't have that to talk about. But if you do, I would pull it up because investors and people are looking for that right away, and then kind of move into making them care about what you're building.
Thank you.
So I want to move on to handling feedback. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because most people don't talk about this. And it's really, really important. So I believe that you should practice handling feedback just as much as you practice your pitch. I believe that those unscripted moments where people are asking you questions, kind of free flow, and you're having to be good on your feet is maybe even more important than the pitch. Because as we've already talked about, right, they're trying to get to know you as a founder. What are you about? 9 times out of 10, what you're pitching me in this 0 to 1 phase is not going to be where you end up. You're going to pivot. Almost every single startup I've worked with ends up pivoting in some way, sometimes minor, sometimes major, in the course of a summer. So it's not so much the pitch that matters, it's you that matters. And those unscripted moments really start to show who you are as a founder. So if you're getting super defensive when somebody's giving you feedback, that's a signal to me that you are not coachable, and I don't want to work with you. And there have been multiple academic studies done around coachability, and it turns out that people who appear coachable get invested in at a much higher rate than people who don't. It also shows that people who appear coachable are considered more trustworthy than people who are not. And trustworthiness is one of the top things that investors talk about when they think about investing in someone. Is this person trustworthy? So there's a real connection to being coachable and how you handle feedback to how much investment you're going to get and how you're going to get people interested in working with you. So how you handle feedback becomes very, very important, and this has been proven, statistically proven, to be true. So I want you to think about, A, practicing Q&A with people. And, when you're giving a formal pitch, like in a demo day, it's really good if you start to notice you get the same questions over and over, maybe having a few slides in your appendix that will allow you to be like, oh, I'm going to jump to this slide to answer your question because it kind of shows that you've thought ahead. And it also allows you to leave some stuff out of your main pitch because a lot of times you're on a time crunch and you can't get to everything. And you don't want to get to everything because getting to everything ends up being confusing anyway. So you can deliberately leave some important things out knowing that somebody's going to ask you that question. And then you look like a rock star. You're like, yeah, I can answer that question. And here's a slide that helps back me up. So that's another great way to kind of show that you're anticipating feedback. You're anticipating what people want to know about your business, and you're really professional and thorough. The other thing is, demonstrating active listening. So we've talked a little bit about using your body in pitches. Certainly, nonverbal cues that you're listening are really important. I'm nodding. I'm looking you in the face. I'm writing it down, what you're saying to me. I'm making notes. I'm repeating back to you what you said to me in a way to make sure that I've clarified what I'm learning from you. These are all great ways to demonstrate that you're listening and that demonstrate that you're open to feedback. The other thing is the yes and technique, and this comes from the world of improv, actually. And HBS students are really good at the yes and technique because it's about building on someone else's comment. And you are all excellent at that by now by virtue of being in the HBS classroom for a year. So yes and is about somebody gives you a comment, and maybe it's not exactly where you want to go with your business, or it's not exactly right. So you don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but you do want to acknowledge that it's a valid comment. So you say yes and you kind of go in another direction, or you kind of build on it to take it in another direction. This is going to be so easy for you guys. You probably are already doing this. You don't even realize it because HBS kind of ingrains it in you to build on other people's comments. But by saying yes and, you're saying you're inclusive. You're not saying no, no, think about it like this, because that's not coachable. But if you say yes and, you're being inclusive, you're showing you want to build on it. Now, the other thing that I get asked a lot is, like, what if I don't know the answer? Someone asks me a question, I don't know the answer. Well, this is actually a real opportunity. So you can say something like, I don't have that answer right now at my fingertips, but I do have it back at my office, and I'd love to go through it with you. Can I follow up with you to give you the answer to this question? Now, the brilliant part about that is because now you have another opportunity to talk to this person and start to develop a relationship. So remember, at the beginning, I talked about this is about building relationships. So this is a great way to talk to them again and show them a little bit more about your business. Another thing that can happen sometimes is somebody asks you a question and the answer that you need to give is very complicated and long. Avoid those answers at all costs. The last thing you want to do is confuse your audience, especially if you're doing like a demo day type of thing. So they ask you a question that's a really good question, but it's complicated, it has many layers. Thank you so much for that question. That's an excellent question, and I think about that a lot. And it turns out the answer to it is pretty layered and it's pretty complex. And I won't have time to do it justice here. Can I follow up with you afterwards and go through it? So that way you get off the hook of kind of answering it in the moment where you could end up confusing people because you're rushing and you're trying to get through it. And at the same time, again, you get this opportunity to talk to them again offline and meet with them offline. So those are some tactics and tips for how to handle some things that might come up in a Q&A session. And the other piece of it is, make sure you follow up on feedback. If you got good feedback from someone, make sure you go back to them and say thank you. Like I acted on this feedback, it was really helpful. Or I reached out to this person that you suggested I reach out to and it was amazing. People love to know that they were helpful to you. Obviously, everyone loves to help entrepreneurs. Everyone loves to help HBS entrepreneurs for sure. So it's really nice when you go back and you sort of say, you know what, I followed up on what you said and this was great. I mean, I still do this myself. Someone made an intro for me the other day. It was amazing. And so I went back to that person, like, thank you so much for that intro to John. He was awesome. We're going to collaborate on this. And, couldn't have done it without you. I appreciate you. Now, that guy who introduced me to John is going to do it for me again because he knows that it was useful to me and I appreciated it. These are little tiny things, but these are relationship builders. And again, you are trying to build relationships. Think about feedback as a gift. People are giving you a gift, and you have to be appreciative of it. Now, don't confuse this with saying that I'm saying to you, you have to follow every single thing that somebody tells you. You do not. You're going to get a lot of crap feedback, a lot of stuff that is not right for you, that you don't care about, that you don't want to do for your business, and that is a-okay. You cannot do anything with it. But you do need to value it in the moment. You do need to say something like, thank you so much, I hadn't thought of that, or thank you so much, I really appreciate you giving some thought to this and showing me a perspective I didn't think of. Whatever it is, just appreciate it. But you don't have to follow it. So please don't assume that that's what I'm saying. The other piece, and we touched on this a little bit, is pitching is personal, right? You're pitching to people, and you are a person. So do a little research. People who you're pitching to, investors and mentors and advisors, potential advisors, they're going to expect that you did some research on them. So show that you did it. It's very easy these days to learn about people, what they care about, what their motivations are, and particularly with investors, most of them have websites that show what they've invested in before, and many investors are very active on social media, and they kind of express where their expertise is, and you can read on LinkedIn where they've worked before. So do that research before you meet with someone so that you can be prepared to make a connection with them. Sometimes it's making a personal connection. You know, oh, I know you grew up in a small town. I grew up in a small town, and you know, I thought it was hilarious that we only had one street in the middle of town, and that's where everybody went, or whatever. You know, pick something that you know about them that connects with you personally, and it starts a conversation that is not about your company, but is about starting a relationship with that person. And then the same thing about work-related things. If you know they invested in a company that might be adjacent to what you're trying to do, you can say, oh man, I know you invested in HubSpot, and I could see a world where we could partner with HubSpot on this thing, and I would love your help in thinking through that. So you're making a very specific connection to what they've done or care about, and you're connecting it to what you're doing. This speaks volumes about you as a founder, that you're very thorough, that you research, that you care about the details, and it also makes that person feel good that you've thought long and hard about how they can help you. You're not just blanket pitching anybody who will listen to you. I hate those pitches. If somebody's just blanket pitching me because they found me on LinkedIn, they're like, hey, I saw that you're in TBD Angels, and so you definitely want to hear about my pitch. No, I don't. You should find out what I like to invest in. What are the kinds of companies I invest in? It's pretty easy to find out. I write it everywhere. So, you know, do that research and come at me with something very specific that shows me that you did some research on me. And of course, be yourself. So that's connected to some of this other stuff that I'll get into in a second. But this is a screenshot from a website called NFX Signal, and it's from a venture capital firm called NFX. And what they've done is they've created a giant database of investors that you can search through by stage that they invest in, by geography they've invested in, by industry, by, you know, do they like to invest in female founders or not? Do they, what size check do they write? And I'm showing you this because finding the right investors for your company is hard, and I would never recommend to you to blanket the whole world with your pitch. Be strategic. Find people who care about what you're pitching. So, like, let's say, for example, you are creating you're a woman founder, and you're creating a company that solves a distinctly female problem. Let's say menopause, for example, and you're blanket pitching the world on your solution. Well, if you're pitching someone who has never invested in a female, don't waste your time. They're not going to invest in you. Like, move on. You're not going to be the one that changes their mind. If you're talking to someone who's never invested in a healthcare company, move on. They're not going to talk to you. Know who cares about what you care about and pitch to those folks. So NFX is just one example. Signal NFX is just one example of ways you can research investors. There are lots of them. There are many, many databases and directories and Airtables like this in the world, and they're actually pretty easy to find. And a lot of investors actually put out, or serial entrepreneurs will put out their own Airtable of who they talked to and what they thought and what they knew, and they'll make those things public. and they'll share a lot of information with you. So search those things out and do your research on the kinds of investors that are going to invest in you. Other tactics for building relationships. Warm intros do help. Unfortunately, they do, and they matter. You are lucky because you are HBS students, so you are now connected to one of the best networks in the world. Don't be afraid to use that. Use the alumni database as much as you possibly can. I have never, ever, ever heard of someone from HBS not being willing to talk to someone if they have approached them in the right way. So trying to get a warm intro as an HBS person should not be hard for you. There is got to be a way, and you should find it. There's got to be a way for you to get to the person you want to meet. It's probably only 3 or 4 degrees of separation at most. So try and get warm intros where you can. And at the same time, as you're getting those people in your world, build relationships with them. Don't come across as if you're just using them to get that intro. Build a relationship with them. And at the same time, you're going to meet so many people along the way. This connects to my next point about update emails. As you're building your company, you should be sending out update emails every quarter. And that update email is really simple. It says, let me remind you what we're building. Here's our elevator pitch. Here's what happened since I last sent this email out to you. Here's a couple things we're struggling with. Here's a couple wins we've had. And here are some asks I have for you. And the ask part is the most important part of the update email. It's where you sort of say, I need to get to HR people in tech companies, or I need to get to, or I'm looking to hire a CTO, or I'm looking to somebody who knows about the medical record, the EMR systems, and I want to interview them for customer discovery. It can be anything, but it's an ask about like, how can this network of people that you're sending this email out to help you? Now, I probably get 50 update emails every quarter from all the startups that I meet. Some of them are good and some of them are bad, but I tell you, I read every single one of them. And most often, I can't help with the ask, but sometimes I can. And they are so glad that I read that email because I'm going to connect them to somebody that they need to know, or I'm going to answer a question that they need to know. So the update email is a really strategic thing because it keeps that relationship with people you meet, and then it can also just lead to more connections. And the thing is, it's super easy to do. It takes no time. It can be bullets. It doesn't have to be this beautiful prose designed thing. It can just be an email. And the idea is that every person you meet, whether they invest in you or not, whether they agree to work with you or not, you just say, listen, I sent out an update email. Is it okay if I put you on the distribution list? Now, they're either going to say, yeah, sure, great, or they're going to say no, big deal. It's fine, no skin off your back. But at least you asked and you put them on, and over time, you're going to get this huge network of people, and that network of people is going to serve you. And all you have to do is just keep them up to date with what you're doing. It's not hard, but it works, and it does a lot for you. So I would highly encourage you, if you haven't started, keeping a database of who you've met and sending out update emails, get on it. Start doing it. The other thing is offer help. This is a community. Be helpful to other people. Offer to give other introductions that maybe you have that they need, or offer, send an article about something that you read that might be relevant to them that maybe they missed. Be helpful to other people. People remember people who are helpful to each other. People don't want to feel like they're just being used in a one-way relationship. Again, your relationship building, make it a two-way street. Do a give and get. And then last, authenticity. Don't be somebody you're not. It will come out eventually that you were not being authentic, and that is a bad thing. Be yourself. So this means don't put on airs, don't name drop, try not to be fake in any way. And sometimes this means if you're not naturally a funny person, don't try to be funny. It's so cringy. And you know what I mean. I know you guys know what I mean. So be true to yourself and be who you are and let them see that. Again, they're trying to get to know you as a founder. They're trying to decide if they want to spend their time and money on you. They want to know the real you. So I'm at the end of my activity here, and I'm going to leave some time for questions. But these are a few of the takeaways I want you to remember. Storytelling. We talked a lot about storytelling, and I gave you some tactics about how to do good storytelling. And Because you are telling good stories, people are going to remember you and your message. Remember the 4 H's as your talk track, and try to structure your talk track around the 4 H's. The 4 H's can ebb and flow to your time, right? You can do the 4 H's in 3 minutes, you can do the 4 H's in 10 minutes. And then handling those unscripted moments, the Q&A, the feedback, all those things really show who you are. So make sure you're prepared to show professionalism and smarts in every instance that you find yourself being in that kind of environment. They matter just as much as how your deck looks and how your deck sounds and how you sound pitching. And I think that, again, practicing, there's nothing wrong with practicing that. In fact, I would encourage you. So my book is on Amazon. If you want to read more, there's tons more information about how to do pitches, how to create your pitch. The book takes you through creating a pitch, and by the end of it, you will have a pitch. It talks about fundraising a little bit. It's not a book about fundraising, but it does talk about fundraising a little bit. And it talks a little bit about the more part of raising money, mentors, and more, because that more part is really helpful too. Entrepreneurship can be really lonely. It's very hard, and you need that village of people around you to help support you and cheer you on and care about you as a founder. So that more part is just as important as the money and mentors part. So I encourage you to think about how you're going to get really great at building relationships and finding the people who can help you along on your journey. Does anybody have questions? We've got some time. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, you had mentioned that in receiving feedback, much of it is not good and doesn't need to be acted upon. I was curious if you had advice on how to discern whether it should be acted upon or should not. I think that's been one of the more challenging things for me to discern this summer.
It is. It's really hard. And it's crazy how much people want to give you feedback, right? You're like, oh my God, like honestly. And it is hard. And again, it's so, I can't tell you, I don't know enough about your business to tell you what's good or bad. Only you know what's good or bad. If it's something that's going to take you away from what is your main focus right now, and it sounds like maybe you should investigate it, try and set up a small experiment that might tell you whether or not you should invest more time in it. Doing small, short experiments on things in a way that is pretty contained might be worth it in some cases, because it could send you in a direction you hadn't thought of. But don't like wholesale, shift your business just based on one piece of feedback from someone that's like, oh man, you're missing this incredible opportunity over here. You should go over there. Don't switch your whole life over that. Do a little small experiment to see if they're right, and keep it pretty contained. And then maybe they are. Maybe there's something to what they're saying. But, I think there's like taking the feedback and then there's taking the feedback. Like just do a little piece of it and see what you can learn from it. But only you know what's right for you. You know where you want to take your business. Mentors and investors, they all have opinions about it, and many of them are very experienced. So their opinions are good and they are interesting. So it's thinking about like how much time and energy would it take to play out that piece of feedback, and then deciding if you're willing to use that time and energy to play out that piece of feedback.
Cool. Thank you.
Sue.
I was curious on what you said about the update emails. When do you think is a good time in your startup to start doing that? Because I guess, we've been speaking with a lot of people, but our idea has changed a little bit since we first started. I guess, how do you balance updating them, but also not making it look like you're pivoting all the time and don't really know what you're doing? So when's the right time to start sending out those kinds of updates?
Great question. I think that people who work with entrepreneurs a lot understand this process. I mean, it's very much of it's an experimental process. You're checking things out. You're changing your target audience. Most of you are probably only in the customer discovery phase this summer. That's okay. People who work with entrepreneurs know that that's how that process goes, so it's okay. I think it's just how you write about it. So you can be in this phase and still send update emails. It's just how you write about it. And the way you write about it is we're learning this, we're learning that. So put it in the context of we're doing all these things and we're changing what we're doing because we're learning. Failure equals learning. And everybody who works with entrepreneurs or who has been an entrepreneur understands that. So as long as you're kind of putting these changes and these small pivots into the context of learning more about where you should go and what you should do, I think it's worthwhile to put out there. If I'm not seeing that kind of progress in an email update, then I'm kind of like, well, what is this team doing? Like, I want to jump in and help you because you're obviously not doing the experiments you need to do to figure out where to go. So I think people understand that kind of sort of marching around and not necessarily knowing the exact direction to go in, but as long as you put it in the context of learning, I think people understand that. So you can start now, and I would encourage you to start now, because you also never know who's going to come out of the woodwork and be helpful to you, and those people are invaluable.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Hi, Kenny.
Hi again. Yeah, sorry. So many questions. This has been such a good session. On the update email point, like what is going through, I guess, your mind and people on the receiving end of the email? I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm on email lists of other people, and sometimes I don't read the updates because I feel like, sure, like maybe I might not help, but I'm also not getting something out of it. So I kind of have this mentality of like, oh, you need to be a giver somehow. You need to give some insights or an investment opportunity. And I'm kind of trying to draw a parallel between informal advisory groups where you're not giving equity, but you like give people the opportunity to get a sneak peek of your product, get like a free 2-month trial on it, or get networking opportunities. Like in update emails, what can you give to the people that are on your list? And what are they thinking about getting out of your email distribution list?
I've never been asked that question before. That's super interesting. I guess I never think about it as that I need something from an update email. I definitely think it's important to offer help and do that give and get, but I don't think the update email is the place for that. I think the update email is sort of creating your community, creating your village, and now you're just updating them. And so what you're giving them is the opportunity to jump in and help you. And people who help entrepreneurs just want to be asked for help and be asked specifically. One thing I do hate is when people say, I want to pick your brain about something. Please don't pick my brain. That's painful. I want you to ask me something very specific, and that's what you're doing in that ask section. And then I can decide if I can help you or not. So you're making it easy for me to interact with you. And that's how I view the update email. It's not necessarily that I'm going to get a free trial or get something from you, but you're making it easy for me to help you if I want to help you. And that's why those people are reading those emails, is because generally they want to help you. If they ask to be let off the email, then they just don't have the desire to help you right now, and that's okay. But I don't think you have to give them anything more than that. I think the onus is on you to make it really specific ask so that people who can help you know how to help you. But otherwise, I don't think you have to give them anything. Anyone else? Diana.
Yes, thank you. Really great talk. I'm just wondering, I feel like there's different philosophies around pitching in terms of like, you pitch, when you're building something, you'll pitch at any occasion if it comes up, because everyone could be an enabler. Like if you're in the coffee queue with someone who you know and who might be instrumental and so on. But then there's also this thing, if you operate or if you want to build something in a very competitive space, like should you be in stealth mode? Should you be like not sending update emails that could be forwarded to others? Like, how do you think about when to start pitching? Or do you believe in like abundance mindset, just, put your idea out because it will like benefit you? Or like, I'm like not sure when to start talking about like who and how specifically to talk about what I'm working on.
I can understand why you're struggling with that, because for entrepreneurs, they're like, oh, this is a really competitive space. What if someone steals my idea? So I guess in the update email, for example, I wouldn't share anything that's like super confidential until you feel you're ready to share that, because I do think people do forward them. But by the same token, I do think that the idea of being stealth mode is kind of silly. So that's just my personal opinion. I guess I'm more of the abundance side, that you never know who's going to be the most helpful person to you. So you should tell everybody what you're working on. So I'm of the mindset that execution is pretty much everything, that there's always going to be competitors. There's always going to be someone else building what you're building. And it comes down to who's going to be the best at getting people to help them and who's going to be the best at execution. I don't think you can think of any industry or any startup where there isn't going to be a competitor or someone else building the same thing. So I think being secretive about it is only going to hurt you in the end. So I'm on that team. I can understand why some people are not on that team, and I respect it, but I think I'm on the team of abundance. Anybody else? Okay, well, I think we're at time anyway, so that works out well. This was super fun for me. I hope it was fun and helpful for you. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you'd like to, and I'm happy to get all of your update emails as well. If you want to put me on your email list. The Rock Center knows how to get in touch with me. Like I said at the very beginning, I'm at HBS, so I'm on campus. I'm here if you want to meet with me. And I also just had so much fun talking with you all and spending some time with you, and I wish you huge good luck and an awesome rest of your summer. Thanks very much.
Thank you.